For him to be able to, score 51 and 9 assists, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, steal. I mean, Kevin was incredible.
Durant stopping from the elbow.
Woo! He had to go on. He had the look in his eyes that he wasn't going to want to come out.
He wants 50. Fades and hits. There it is. 51 for Kevin Durant.
Are you aware whose arena scoring record you broke tonight? Whose? Blake Griffin's.
And a monster performance by Blake Griffin. He scores 50.
Yeah, really?
Not a lot of people have the opportunity to see what goes into something like that. I think for me, it's special to see what happens behind the curtains and behind the closed doors. An unreal game by him.
So Durant became the 6th player in NBA history to score 50 with 3 different teams. That joins LeBron, Wilt, Moses, Bernard King, Jamal Crawford. This was Durant's first time scoring 50 since November of 2018, and that's when he was with Golden State. So it's his first 50-point game since then. It's his 7th in his career, well, 8th if you include the postseason, right? But he's currently leading the league in scoring. So is this, Zach, the best version of Kevin Durant all time?
It's like asking, like, is this the best ice cream flavor? They're all.
I'm thinking you were going to say ice cream.
They're all amazing. First of all,
wait, what's your favorite? I just have to know.
You, Rocky Road.
You're going to put me on the spot?
Yes.
Vanilla and chocolate mixed together.
That's right.
Boring.
Look, enough. First of all, I love that KD answered the 50 question honestly. Like, KD, you love him or not like him, he's always honest. He couldn't help but give an honest answer. Yeah, I knew it. Like, the politically correct answer is different than that. Is it the best ever? I think last year's playoffs and this year's KD, it's just about as good as basketball gets. So, yes, and I think his defense this season has been underrated. The Nets are a top 5 defensive team, and you look up and down the roster, it's like, how is that even possible? Well, you have a 7-footer who can guard every position, switch across every position, block shots, rebound. The load he is carrying is massive, and I just think it's just majestic what he's doing.
Thank you for bringing that up. Top 5 defensive team. I mean, that is super impressive because when the Big Three was assembled in Brooklyn, the idea was that this is the best offense. We saw all those numbers, and so they're going to try to make sure that they have their balanced basketball. But for me, yeah, this is the best version of Kevin Durant that we have seen since 2013, 2014, when he averaged 32 points per game, and he won MVP that season because he's right up there at 29 points per game. He also averaged 30, I think it was in 09-010 when LeBron won MVP. But the reality is, I mean, there have been so many changes of season. I know we're all like into the winter now. Winter has come. But like that's what he's been able to do in multiple facets of the game. Weather the storm. Weather the storm.
I see the metaphor you're.
Thank you. I brought you full circle.
Yeah.
But being that lone piece that can always go out there and always say, get you a bucket, but most importantly, just be consistent after years that have been tumultuous with injury has been very, very impressive.
Right. Not to mention, like you said, that he did it after an Achilles injury and has sort of redefined how we think of how a player can come back from.
He and Breonna Stewart, yes.
Right. From an injury, Breonna Stewart, absolutely, that was seen as so catastrophic. But remember, James Harden, he rested last night. So that means the rest of the Nets starting 5 were LaMarcus Aldridge, Patty Mills, James Johnson, and DeAndre Bembry. So that's not exactly the scariest group, right? So with that as the backdrop, is what Kevin Durant is doing for Brooklyn more or less on par with what impresses us about what Steph Curry is doing?
Well, I would actually say it's pretty equal in my estimation. Both Steph and KD have all-star running mates, Draymond Green and James Harden, even though he didn't play, just recently. But if you look at what they've been able to do, they've been consistent for their squads. Both of them are pacing their conferences respectively. I know the Suns, we're going to talk about power rankings and all that stuff. That's in a little bit. But, yeah, I'm very impressed. I just think that the difference with Kevin Durant, like, yeah, we have higher expectations offensively with James Harden than we do per se with Draymond Green. But Draymond Green is a defensive player of the year and has been holding it down. If you look at some of the defensive numbers of the Warriors, it's quite wild. Even, when you pinpoint Steph, and that's the Draymond Green effect. So overall, I think both of these guys, they're 33 years old, and they understand the assignment of keeping everyone afloat until their all-star players come back. Question mark Kyrie, question mark when Clay comes back. Clay's coming back soon, which I'm very excited.
Right.
Can I just be impressed by both? I just want to be impressed. Okay. I just want to be impressed by both because they're both so impressive. But I will say the difference is the Warriors have an identity that is consistent night to night. They have a style of play that doesn't change. They have a bunch of players who fit that style of play. You roll the ball out, they know how they're going to play. The Nets, it's like a different starting 5 every night. Sometimes the spacing is good, sometimes it's not good. Sometimes they play traditional defense, then Claxton comes in and they switch everything. Durant has been the constant. You can switch everything else around him. He's been the constant. His minutes are crazy how many minutes he's playing. So in that sense, just adapting to a different environment every night, he faces a different challenge than Curry does for sure.
You mentioned mentioned it, 36.5 minutes per game. That's what he is averaging this season. Brooklyn hosts Toronto. That is tomorrow night. So I do want to shift gears here a little bit, you both. We are almost 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, and COVID has impacted countless lives across the world. There have been over 270 million cases, and that includes more than 5.3 million deaths. And the matter of the fact is that coronavirus, it's not going anywhere. It's part of the way we live our lives now. So please, please wear a mask, get vaccinated, and have empathy. But sometimes those precautions, they aren't enough to keep you COVID-free. And that is the same no matter who you are, whether you're a peer hosting a show, whether you're at home watching this right now, whether you are some of the athletes that we root for or cover. Today, multiple professional leagues, they've been impacted by COVID, and the NHL's Flames, their next 3 games have been postponed after 6 players and a staff member entered the league's COVID-19 protocols over a 24-hour period. And in Manchester, the Manchester United, they're in talks with the Premier League about postponing Tuesday's match at Bedford after the club closed its training facility due to coronavirus infections. And the NBA, it's also fighting this fight, and no team is fighting it more than Chicago. And earlier today, our senior NBA insider, Adrian Wojnarowski, he reported that the NBA is postponing the Bulls' upcoming games against the Pistons and the Raptors after a 10th player entered COVID-19 protocols. So Alize Johnson, he joins 9 other Bulls in the NBA's health and safety protocols. That list includes Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Kobe White. Players in the protocols, of course, must enter quarantine for 10 days or return 2 negative PCR tests in 24 hours. So, as I mentioned, Adrian Wojnarowski, you've been all over this reporting, and you now join NBA Today. Thank you for being here, Woj. How did the NBA come to this decision to postpone?
Malika, really a number of factors, but the list of players you just gave, and the fact that Chicago, who would need 8 eligible players to play, this is just such a skeleton version of a team. And the fact that, listen, players are going to start coming back out of COVID protocol. They may not be ready to play right away. Kobe White was at the facility yesterday trying to ramp back up. And certainly, that the health of not just their players, but other players. You don't want other players on other teams to be exposed to Bull players who may be positive. And, part of this decision, I'm told, too, the Chicago Public Health Department, they did not want to see this Bulls team with 10 players in protocol continue to be out on a court exposed, not just to each other, but other players. And, those were some of the factors, the most significant factors in the NBA postponing Tuesday's game with Detroit, Thursday's game with Toronto. So the Bulls do not play again until next Sunday at home against the Lakers.
So Chicago, we know, though, they're not the only team that's impacted by COVID, but they're feeling it the most right now. Why might we be seeing more cases with the Bulls than other teams across the league, Woj?
Yeah, this has been a dynamic that's, teams talked about from the very beginning of the season that could be an issue. And you're seeing it now. You saw multiple cases in Charlotte. They're starting to get some players back out of protocol. But remember, if players are vaccinated, and really close, almost close to 100% of the players in the league are, 97, 98% now, they don't test every day. So once the Bulls got a positive test with a player, well, then they start testing everybody. So there are plenty of teams, if players have the virus and are asymptomatic and there's no testing going on, they may be playing with the virus because there's not testing with those teams. And so I think for Chicago, Charlotte, I think there was a sense there that they were taking out a bigger brunt of loss of players and having to test every day. Now, starting Friday next week, or this week, if you don't have your booster shot in the NBA, then you'll be tested on game nights. And so I think for the Bulls, because once there was that one positive test, everyone's being tested. And I talked to one GM today who said, listen, we aren't testing now. We haven't been testing. But it isn't as if we see players, who might have symptoms and we're ignoring it. We haven't seen that with our group. But that doesn't mean we haven't had players who are positive who've been on the court.
Absolutely, and we saw the league change one of those protocols with the booster shot now being a necessity in order to be considered fully vaccinated. We'll see if these protocols continue to change and morph, especially as new variants come up. Thank you so much for joining us, Woj. Coming up on NBA Today, LeBron James.